A millionaire invites an overweight woman to a luxury party with the intention of humiliating her. But what she did upon arriving left all the guests in shock. Sarah sighed deeply as she pushed the shopping cart down the supermarket aisle. Her tired eyes scanned the shelves, mentally calculating how much she could spend without compromising her tight budget. With each item she placed in the cart, she felt the weight not only of the groceries, but also of the responsibilities she carried alone. As she reached the cashier, Sarah began to unload the products, placing them on the conveyor belt. Her heart raced as the attendant started scanning the items. The numbers on the machine's display climbed rapidly, and Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. "That'll be $178.50, ma'am," said the cashier with a sympathetic smile. Sarah rummaged through her worn purse, her trembling hands searching for her wallet. As she opened it, her face paled. She was $20 short of the total. She began to sweat, feeling the impatient glares of other customers in line behind her. I'm sorry," Sarah stammered, beginning to set aside some items to return. "I'll have to leave some things." It was at that moment that a deep, imposing voice sounded behind her. "That won't be necessary, ma'am. I'll pay the difference." Sarah turned, surprised, and found herself face to face with a tall, well-dressed man of imposing appearance. His blue eyes looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "But, sir, you don't have to," Sarah tried to argue, feeling embarrassed. "I insist," he said, extending a black credit card to the cashier. "Consider it an act of charity." The condescending tone in his voice didn't go unnoticed by Sarah, who felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. But necessity spoke louder, and she accepted the help in silence. As the cashier finalized the purchase, the man introduced himself. "Robert Thompson," he said, extending his hand. "And you are—" "Sarah," she replied hesitantly. "Sarah Miller." Robert observed her from head to toe, his gaze lingering on Sarah's plump figure, her simple clothes and her tired posture. An enigmatic smile formed on his lips. "Well, Sarah," he said, taking a business card from his pocket and handing it to her, "I'm organizing a charity event next Saturday. Why don't you show up? It might be an interesting opportunity for someone in your situation." Sarah took the card, confused and a little offended by the insinuation. Before she could respond, Robert had already walked away, leaving her with a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. As she walked home, carrying the heavy bags, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the invitation. On one hand, she felt humiliated by Robert's attitude. On the other, she couldn't deny that a charity event could be a unique opportunity to change her life and that of her son. Upon arriving home, a small apartment in the suburbs, Sarah was greeted by the radiant smile of her son, Ethan. "Mum!" exclaimed the 10-year-old boy, running to hug her with all the strength his fragile body allowed. Sarah felt tears form in her eyes as she hugged her son. Ethan suffered from a rare disease that affected his immune system, requiring constant care and expensive medications. It was for him that Sarah had abandoned her promising career as a chef, exchanging the kitchens of starred restaurants for temporary and poorly paid jobs. As she prepared the simple dinner for the two of them, Sarah couldn't get the card Robert had given her out of her head. The event would be in a few days, and she knew she had nothing appropriate to wear, nor money to buy something new. But looking at Ethan, who was happily playing with his few toys, Sarah made a decision. She would go to the event, not for herself, but for the chance to provide a better life for her son. With renewed determination, she began to plan how she could prepare for the event that, unbeknownst to her, would completely change the course of her life. The days that followed the encounter at the supermarket were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. With each passing hour, she oscillated between expectation and fear of what might happen at Robert's party. While caring for Ethan and running from one odd job to another, her mind didn't stop imagining scenarios, some hopeful, others terrifying. On Thursday night, 2 days before the party, Sarah sat at the small kitchen table, hand-sewing an old dress she had found at the back of the closet. It was a simple black dress that she hadn't worn in years, since before her pregnancy. With some alterations and a bit of creativity, she hoped to transform it into something presentable for the occasion. Ethan, who was sitting on the couch watching television, coughed hard, making Sarah look up worriedly. "Is everything okay, sweetie?" she asked, dropping the needle and going to her son. "Yes, Mom," Ethan replied with a weak smile. "I'm just a little tired." Sarah placed her hand on the boy's forehead, feeling it a bit warm. Her heart tightened. Ethan's medicines were almost gone, and the salary she would receive next week would barely cover the rent. "Let's get you to bed, dear," she said softly. "You'll feel better tomorrow." After putting Ethan to bed, Sarah returned to the kitchen and stared at the half-finished dress. For a moment, she considered giving up on the absurd idea of going to the party. What could she, a simple and out-of-shape woman, do at an event full of rich and sophisticated people? But then her eyes fell on Ethan's photo on the refrigerator. In it, the boy was smiling, holding a trophy from a school science contest. Sarah remembered the gleam in his eyes when he talked about his dream of becoming a scientist and finding a cure for his own disease. With a determined sigh, Sarah picked up the needle again. She would go to the party no matter how uncomfortable she felt. For Ethan, she would face any challenge. On Friday, Sarah could barely concentrate on her work as a cleaner in an office downtown. Her thoughts were divided between worry about Ethan's health and anxiety about the party. During her lunch break, she walked to a nearby department store. With the little money she had managed to save, she bought a pair of low-heeled shoes on sale and a simple costume jewelry necklace. It wasn't much, but she hoped these small details would help her feel more confident. When she returned home that night, Sarah found her neighbor and friend, Mrs. Johnson, taking care of Ethan. The elderly lady smiled as she saw her enter. "Oh, Sarah, good thing you're back," said Mrs. Johnson. "Ethan had a bit of a fever this afternoon, but he's better now. I gave him the medicine you left." Sarah thanked her neighbor and went to check on her son. Ethan was sleeping peacefully, his breathing a little heavier than normal, but stable. She softly kissed his forehead, feeling her heart tighten. "Mom's going to make it, my love," she whispered. "I'm going to find a way to get your medicines and give you a better life. I promise." On Saturday, the day of the party, Sarah woke up early, a mixture of nervousness and determination running through her veins. She prepared breakfast for Ethan, made sure he took his medicines, and called Mrs. Johnson, who had offered to take care of him during the night. When the afternoon came, Sarah began to get ready. She took a long shower, trying to relax her tense muscles. She dried her hair carefully, making soft curls with her fingers. She applied simple makeup, as she hadn't done in a long time. Finally, she put on the dress she had spent hours adjusting. She looked in the mirror and for a moment saw a glimpse of the confident woman she used to be before life's difficulties had transformed her. "You can do this, Sarah," she said to her reflection. "Do it for Ethan." When Mrs. Johnson arrived to stay with Ethan, she looked Sarah up and down and smiled. "My goodness, girl." "You look beautiful," exclaimed the lady. "You're going to knock them dead at that party." Sarah smiled shyly, thanking her for the compliment. She kissed Ethan, who looked at her with admiration, and left for the night, her heart pounding in her chest. The taxi dropped her off in front of an imposing mansion on the outskirts of the city. Bright lights illuminated the well-tended garden, and the sound of music and lively conversations could be heard from afar. For a moment, Sarah hesitated on the sidewalk, feeling completely out of place. But then she took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked towards the entrance. She didn't know what the night held in store, but she was determined to face whatever it might be, for herself and for Ethan. Sarah felt her heart race as she approached the mansion's entrance. The sound of laughter and elegant conversations grew louder with each step, and she couldn't help but notice the luxurious cars parked in the circular driveway of the property. As she reached the door, she was greeted by a butler with a serious expression. "Good evening, madam. Your name, please?" "Sarah Miller," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. The butler consulted a list and, to Sarah's relief, nodded. "Welcome, Mrs. Miller. Please follow the corridor to your right." Sarah entered, her eyes widening at the luxury surrounding her. The entrance hall was decorated with expensive artwork and antique furniture that seemed to be worth more than she earned in a year. Following the butler's instructions, she walked down the corridor, the sound of her heels echoing on the marble floor. As she entered the main hall, Sarah was immediately enveloped by a sea of elegance and opulence. Women in designer dresses and men in expensive suits circulated through the environment, champagne glasses in hand and polite smiles on their faces. For a moment, she felt the urge to turn around and flee. "Ah, Sarah, you came!" Robert's voice sounded nearby, and Sarah turned to find him. He looked magnificent in a navy blue suit that accentuated his eyes. His smile, however, had a hint of malice that made Sarah feel uncomfortable. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Thompson," she said, trying to sound confident. "Please call me Robert," he replied, taking 2 champagne flutes from a passing waiter and offering one to Sarah. "Come, let me introduce you to some friends." Before she could protest, Sarah found herself being guided by Robert through the hall. He led her to a group of people engaged in animated conversation. "Everyone," Robert announced loudly, making them all turn to look. "This is Sarah Miller, my special guest tonight." Sarah felt all eyes on her, some curious, others clearly judgmental. She swallowed hard, fighting the urge to shrink. "Sarah," Robert continued, a strange gleam in his eyes, "why don't you tell everyone a little about yourself? I'm sure your story is fascinating." Robert's tone of voice made it clear that he expected Sarah to embarrass herself, that her fascinating story would be cause for laughter and pitying looks. But at that moment, something inside Sarah ignited. She remembered who she was, everything she had already achieved in her life before the difficulties. With a deep breath, Sarah raised her chin and began to speak. "Well, a few years ago I was the executive chef at Le Jardin restaurant," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I specialized in contemporary French cuisine at the Culinary Institute of America in New York." The group around her fell silent, clearly surprised. Robert, who was about to take a sip of his drink, froze with the glass halfway to his mouth. "Le Jardin?" asked an elegant woman. "The restaurant that earned a Michelin star 5 years ago? I loved that place." "What happened?" Sarah smiled, a mixture of pride and melancholy in her eyes. "Life happened," Sarah replied with a soft smile. "My son was born with a rare condition that requires constant care. I had to make a choice between my career and him. I don't regret it for a second, but—" Her voice faltered for a moment and she felt her eyes well up. But Sarah took a deep breath and continued. "But I won't lie, I miss the kitchens. The challenge of creating new dishes, working with fresh ingredients, seeing the satisfaction on customers' faces." The group around her was silent, absorbing her words. Robert, for his part, looked disconcerted. His plan to humiliate Sarah was clearly backfiring. "That's fascinating, Sarah," said a middle-aged man who introduced himself as Michael Parker, a renowned food critic. "I remember trying your dishes at Le Jardin. Your fusion of French techniques with American ingredients was truly innovative." Sarah felt a flush of pride rise to her face. "Thank you, Mr. Parker. It's an honor to hear that from someone with your knowledge." The conversation flowed naturally from there. Sarah found herself discussing culinary trends, sharing stories from her days in the kitchen, and even giving tips on how to improve simple, everyday dishes. The people around her seemed genuinely interested, asking questions and sharing their own gastronomic experiences. Robert, realizing that his attraction was becoming the star of the night, for reasons he hadn't foreseen, tried several times to change the focus of the conversation or make veiled, deprecating comments about Sarah's current situation. However, his attempts fell flat in the face of the authenticity and knowledge she demonstrated. At one point in the evening, Sarah stepped away a bit to get a drink. That's when she noticed an elegant woman observing her with interest. The woman approached, extending her hand. "Emily Winters," she introduced herself. "I'm the CEO of the largest luxury car dealership network in the country. I have to say, Sarah, I'm impressed with you." Sarah shook Emily's hand, feeling a bit intimidated by the aura of power the woman exuded. "Thank you, Mrs. Winters. That's very kind of you." Emily smiled. "Please, call me Emily. You know, Sarah, I've always believed that a person's true character is revealed not in moments of success, but in how they handle adversity. And you clearly have an admirable inner strength." Before Sarah could respond, a scream of panic cut through the air. All heads turned to see an elderly man fallen on the floor, apparently not breathing. "Dad!" Emily shouted, running towards the man. Without hesitation, Sarah ran too. She knelt beside the man, quickly checking his vital signs. "He's having a cardiac arrest," Sarah said calmly and authoritatively. "Someone call an ambulance. I'm going to start CPR." With precise movements, Sarah began performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation. The years of caring for Ethan, Learning all possible first aid techniques now proved crucial. The entire hall watched in tense silence as Sarah worked tirelessly to save Emily's father's life. Minutes that seemed like hours passed until finally, the man coughed and began breathing on his own. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Emily, with tears in her eyes, hugged Sarah. "You saved his life," she whispered. "I'll never forget this." When the paramedics arrived and took Emily's father away, the atmosphere of the party had completely changed. Sarah, who was previously seen as an intruder, was now the center of attention for entirely different reasons. Robert, seeing his plan completely crumble, decided to make one last attempt to humiliate Sarah. "Well, it seems our special guest had her moment of glory," he said loudly, his tone laden with sarcasm. "But let's be honest, at the end of the day, she's still just a—" "Enough, Robert," Emily's firm voice interrupted him. Everyone turned to look at the powerful businesswoman who was now standing beside Sarah. "Your behavior tonight has been shameful, and since you insist on exposing people, why don't we tell everyone about the real reason for this party?" Robert visibly paled. "Emily, I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," Emily continued, her gaze hard. "This party isn't about charity. It's about Robert desperately trying to raise investors to save his crumbling empire. He's on the brink of bankruptcy, people." A shocked murmur ran through the hall. Robert, now red with anger and shame, looked at Sarah with pure hatred before hurriedly leaving the hall. Emily turned to Sarah, a gentle smile on her face. "Sarah, I'd very much like to talk to you about some opportunities. How about we have lunch together next week?" Sarah, still stunned by everything that had happened, could only nod. As the party continued around her, she couldn't help but think about how her life seemed to be about to change drastically. And, for the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of hope ignite in her heart. The next morning after the party, Sarah woke up with her head spinning. The events of the previous night seemed like a distant dream, but Emily Winter's business card on her nightstand was concrete proof that it had all really happened. As she prepared breakfast for Ethan, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Emily's offer. A lunch with one of the most powerful businesswomen in the country could be the turning point she had been hoping for. However, a pang of anxiety hit her. What if it was just a gesture of pity? What if she wasn't up to Emily's expectations? "Mum, are you okay?" Ethan's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You look worried." Sarah smiled at her son, trying to hide her unease. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just thinking about some work stuff." Ethan looked at her with his perceptive eyes, much more mature than his 10 years would suggest. "Is it about the party last night? You came home late and seemed different." Sarah sighed, sitting down next to her son. She always tried to be honest with Ethan as much as possible. "Yes, honey, some things happened at the party and, well, we might have an opportunity to improve our situation." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Really? That's great, Mom." Seeing her son's enthusiasm, Sarah felt her determination renewed. She would do everything possible and impossible to turn this opportunity into something concrete for Ethan. On Monday, Sarah could barely concentrate on her cleaning job. Her thoughts kept returning to the lunch with Emily, scheduled for the next day. When she got home that night, she spent hours choosing the most appropriate outfit and mentally rehearsing what she would say. On Tuesday, Sarah left Ethan in Mrs. Johnson's care and headed to the restaurant Emily had indicated, an elegant establishment in the heart of the financial district. As she entered, she felt momentarily out of place, but took a deep breath and remembered who she was and everything she had already achieved. Emily was already there, seated at a discreet table at the back of the restaurant. Upon seeing Sarah, she smiled and stood up to greet her. "Sarah, I'm glad you came," said Emily, indicating the chair across from her. "Please sit down. I've already ordered an excellent wine for us." As they settled in and placed their orders, Emily got straight to the point. "Sarah, I'll be frank with you. I was extremely impressed by your story and, even more so, by your attitude at the party. You demonstrated not only knowledge and skill, but also admirable strength of character." Sarah felt her cheeks flush at the compliment. "Thank you, Emily. It means a lot to hear that from someone like you." Emily smiled, leaning forward slightly. "I have a proposal for you, Sarah. Actually, 2 proposals." Sarah felt her heart race. "I'm listening." "First," Emily began, I'd like to offer you a job at my company. Not in the automotive area, of course, but we're expanding our network of restaurants in luxury dealerships. We need someone with your culinary knowledge to oversee the operation." Sarah was speechless. It was an incredible opportunity, something that would put her back in the world of gastronomy, albeit in a different way. "And the second proposal?" Sarah asked, barely able to contain her excitement. Emily smiled again. "The second is a bit more personal. I heard about your son Ethan's situation. I'd like to offer you both full medical coverage through my company's health plan. This would include all the treatments and medications he needs." Sarah felt tears form in her eyes. It was more than she had ever dared to dream. With a choked voice, she managed to say, "Emily, I don't know what to say. This is incredible, but why? Why do all this for me?" Emily took Sarah's hand across the table, her gaze softening. "Because I believe in you, Sarah. I see in you the kind of person who can make a difference, not just in business, but in people's lives. And frankly, after you saved my father's life, I feel it's the least I can do." Sarah let the tears flow freely now, a radiant smile lighting up her face. "I accept," she said, her voice firm despite the emotion. "I accept both proposals, and I promise I won't disappoint you." Emily squeezed Sarah's hand, her own smile reflecting the other woman's joy. "I'm sure you won't. Now let's celebrate. And while we're at it, you can tell me more about your ideas for our restaurants." As the two women talked animatedly about future plans, Sarah felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in years, she could see a bright future unfolding before her. A future where she could not only adequately care for Ethan, but also return to the world she loved so much. The lunch extended for hours, with Sarah and Emily discovering they had much in common beyond business. When they finally said goodbye, Sarah left the restaurant feeling light and full of hope. As she walked back home, she couldn't wait to tell Ethan the good news. Her life was about to change drastically, and she was more than ready for this new chapter. In the weeks that followed the lunch with Emily, Sarah's life transformed into a whirlwind of positive changes. She left her job as a cleaner and dove headfirst into her new role in Emily's company. The office assigned to her was spacious and well lit, with a panoramic view of the city. Sarah still found herself admiring the space, hardly believing it was real. Her desk, once occupied by buckets and cleaning products, was now filled with papers, projects, and menu samples. Ethan, for his part, was flourishing with the new treatment. The health plan offered by Emily gave him access to cutting-edge medications and therapies, and the results were visible. His cheeks were rosier, his energy had increased considerably, and his smile, always present, seemed even brighter. One afternoon, while Sarah was reviewing some reports in her office, she received an unexpected call. "Sarah, this is Michael Parker, the food critic. We met at Robert's party." Sarah straightened in her chair, surprised. "Hello, Mr. Parker. Of course I remember. How can I help you?" "Well, I've heard rumors about your new venture with Emily Winters, restaurants in luxury car dealerships. It's an intriguing concept. I was wondering if you'd be willing to grant me an interview for my column in the newspaper." Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. An interview? With one of the most respected critics in the country? It was a great opportunity, but also scary. Well, of course," she stammered a bit. "It would be an honor." "Excellent," exclaimed Michael. "How about we meet next week? We can do the interview at one of your new restaurants if it's already operational." After settling the details with Michael, Sarah hung up the phone feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. An interview could be great publicity for the new venture, but it also meant exposing herself publicly in a way she hadn't done in years. That night, as she prepared dinner for herself and Ethan, Sarah shared the news with her son. "Wow, Mom, you're going to be in the newspaper," Ethan exclaimed, his eyes shining with admiration. Sarah smiled, affectionately ruffling her son's hair. "It looks like it, honey. I'm a little nervous, to be honest." Ethan looked at her seriously. "You're going to crush it, Mum. You're the best chef in the world." The simple and sincere words of Ethan filled Sarah's heart with courage. She hugged her son, silently thanking for having him in her life. The following week, Sarah met with Michael at the first restaurant of the new chain, which had recently been inaugurated in one of the most luxurious dealerships in the city. The space was elegant, with a decor that subtly blended automotive elements with a sophisticated restaurant ambiance. Michael arrived punctually, carrying a small recorder and a notepad. After initial greetings, they sat at a discreet table in the corner of the restaurant. "So, Sarah," Michael began, turning on the recorder, "tell me how this idea of restaurants in luxury dealerships came about." Sarah took a deep breath before answering. Actually, it was a confluence of unexpected events. Emily Winters, the CEO of the dealership chain, saw potential in me and my culinary experience. She wanted to elevate the experience of customers visiting her stores, transforming car buying into something more holistic, let's say. Michael nodded, taking notes. "And how did you adapt your culinary style to this very specific environment?" "It was an interesting challenge," Sarah smiled. "We wanted to create a gastronomic experience that would complement the luxury and sophistication of the cars, but without being intimidating. Our menu combines high gastronomy techniques with familiar ingredients, creating dishes that are both refined and accessible." The interview continued for over an hour, with Michael asking insightful questions about the restaurant concept, the menu, and future plans. Sarah surprised herself with her own eloquence and passion when talking about the project. It was as if a part of her that had been dormant for years had finally awakened. At the end of the interview, Michael turned off the recorder and smiled at Sarah. "That was fascinating, Sarah. You know, when I saw you at that party, I could sense there was something special about you. It's good to see my instincts were right." Sarah blushed at the compliment. "Thank you, Mr. Parker. That means a lot coming from you." "Please call me Michael," he replied, standing up. "And if I may offer an unofficial suggestion, don't limit yourself to supervising. Get back in the kitchen from time to time. Your talent is too great to stay just behind the scenes." With those words, Michael said goodbye, leaving Sarah immersed in thoughts. The idea of cooking professionally again was tempting, but also scary. Did she still have what it took? In the days that followed, Sarah found herself torn between excitement about the success of the new venture and a growing restlessness. Michael's words echoed in her mind, awakening a long-forgotten desire. One night, after putting Ethan to bed, Sarah went to the kitchen. Without thinking too much, she began to take ingredients out of the refrigerator and cupboards. Her hands moved with surprising familiarity, cutting, seasoning, cooking. Hours passed without her noticing. When she finally stopped, the kitchen was a mess. But before her was a dish that could easily feature on the menu of a starred restaurant. Sarah looked at her creation, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. Silent tears ran down her face as she tasted the dish. It was good, very good. And more than that, it was a part of her that had resurfaced. At that moment, Sarah made a decision. She would not only supervise the restaurants, but also return to creating, innovating, cooking. It was time to fully embrace this new opportunity, with all the challenges and joys it would bring. The next day, Sarah scheduled a meeting with Emily to discuss her new ideas. She could hardly wait to share her renewed vision and begin this new chapter of her culinary journey. As she prepared for bed, Sarah looked at Ethan's photo on her bedside table, her heart filled with gratitude and determination. She would make everything work out, not just for her, but for her son, and for all the people who believed in her when she needed it most. The future, which once seemed so uncertain and frightening, now shone with infinite possibilities, and Sarah was ready to embrace them all, one recipe at a time. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity for Sarah. The interview with Michael Parker had generated considerable buzz in the culinary world, and the restaurants in Emily's dealerships were quickly becoming a critical and public success. Sarah divided her time between overseeing operations, training kitchen teams, and, to her great joy, creating new dishes. She had converted a small room in the central office into a test kitchen, where she spent hours experimenting with flavor combinations and techniques. One afternoon, while Sarah was working on a new recipe, Emily entered the test kitchen, her face lit up by a smile. "Sarah, you won't believe it," Emily exclaimed, holding a tablet. "Michael Parker's review of our main restaurant has just come out. Well, see for yourself." Sarah took the tablet with trembling hands, her heart racing as she read. "In a surprising and innovative move, renowned chef Sarah Miller resurfaces in the culinary scene, this time blending haute cuisine with the world of luxury automobiles. The result is nothing short of spectacular. Each dish is a masterpiece that reflects not only impeccable technique, but also a deep understanding of the contemporary palate. The Texture Trilogy, a dish that combines 3 different preparations of the same ingredient, is particularly notable, offering a gustatory experience that is as complex as the engineering of the luxury cars surrounding the restaurant. Sarah could hardly believe what she was reading. Tears of joy began to form in her eyes. "That's not all," Emily continued, barely containing her own excitement. "Reservations have skyrocketed since the review was published, and we've received invitations for you to appear on TV shows and give interviews to gastronomy magazines." Sarah's head was spinning with all this information. It was more than she had ever dreamed of when she accepted Emily's proposal months ago. I don't know what to say," Sarah stammered, still in shock. Emily placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You don't need to say anything. You deserve this, Sarah. Your talent, your dedication, your resilience, all of this brought you here. I'm proud of you and honored to be part of this journey." That night, Sarah celebrated with Ethan. They made a special dinner together, with Ethan helping in the kitchen, his eyes shining with admiration as he watched his mother work. "Mum," Ethan said as they savored dessert, "do you think one day I could be a great chef like you?" Sarah smiled, her heart overflowing with love. "Sweetheart, you can be whatever you want. Chef, scientist, or anything else your heart desires. The important thing is that you follow your dreams and never give up, no matter how difficult things seem." Sarah's words carried the weight of her own journey, of the difficulties she had faced and overcome. She knew the path wouldn't always be easy for Ethan, but she was determined to be by his side, supporting him every step of the way. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's life became a roller coaster of emotions and experiences. She made appearances on cooking shows, gave interviews to renowned magazines, and even began planning a cookbook. However, amidst all the frenzy of success, Sarah never lost sight of what was really important. She made sure to be home every night to have dinner with Ethan, help him with homework and put him to bed. Weekends were sacred, dedicated to park outings, home movie sessions, and of course, lots of culinary experimentation. One day, as Sarah was leaving a particularly stressful meeting about the restaurant chain's expansion, she received an unexpected call. It was Robert Thompson. "Sarah?" Robert's voice sounded different, almost humble. I need to talk to you, it's important." Sarah hesitated for a moment, remembering the last time she saw Robert, how he tried to humiliate her. But something in his tone of voice made her pause. "All right, Robert," she finally replied. "We can meet tomorrow at the cafe near my office." As she hung up the phone, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what Robert could want. Was it another attempt at manipulation, or had something really changed? With a sigh, Sarah put those concerns aside for later. For now, she had a new menu to finalize and an anxious son waiting for her at home. Tomorrow, with its challenges and surprises, would come soon enough. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the cafe with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She spotted Robert sitting at a table in the corner, almost unrecognizable. The man who once exuded arrogance and confidence now seemed diminished, almost fragile. "Hello, Robert," Sarah greeted, sitting across from him. Robert raised his eyes, and Sarah was surprised by the sadness and defeat she saw in them. "Thank you for coming, Sarah," he said, his voice hoarse. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was palpable, laden with the weight of their shared history and the many unspoken words. Finally, Robert broke the silence. I wanted to apologize," he began, the words coming out with difficulty. "For the way I treated you, for trying to humiliate you. I was wrong, so wrong." Sarah observed the man before her, noting the deep, dark circles under his eyes, the hunched posture. This wasn't the Robert she had met months ago. "What happened, Robert?" she asked softly. Robert let out a bitter laugh. "What happened? I lost everything. My company went bankrupt. My friends abandoned me." He paused, swallowing hard. "Then I was diagnosed with a rare disease, the same one your son has." Sarah felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. Of all the things she expected to hear, this certainly wasn't one of them. "Robert, I "I'm sorry," she said, genuinely moved. He shook his head. "Don't be. It's karma, I suppose. I spent my entire life looking down on people like you, thinking I was better, untouchable. And now I understand. I understand the daily struggle, the constant fear, the uncertainty of the future." Sarah reached out, gently touching Robert's arm. "No one deserves to go through this, Robert. Not even you." Robert looked at her hand, his eyes filling with tears. "I don't deserve your compassion, Sarah, not after what I did." "Maybe not," Sarah agreed. "But this is what makes us human, isn't it? The capacity to forgive, to have empathy, even with those who have hurt us." They sat in silence for a few moments, each absorbing the weight of that conversation. "Sarah," Robert finally spoke, his voice almost a whisper. "I know I have no right to ask this, but I need help. The doctors here don't know how to treat my condition, and I heard there's an experimental treatment in Europe, but I no longer have the resources to—" Sarah raised her hand, interrupting him. "Tell me more about this treatment." In the minutes that followed, Robert explained about the innovative therapy that was showing promising results for people with his condition. Sarah listened attentively, her mind already working on possibilities. "All right," she said finally. "I'll see what I can do." "I can't promise anything, Robert, but I'll try to help." Robert's eyes widened in surprise and gratitude. "Sarah, I don't know how to thank you. After everything I did—" Sarah raised her hand, interrupting him again. "I'm not doing this for you, Robert. I'm doing this because I know what it's like to fight against a disease that no one fully understands. I'm doing this for my son, and for all the other people who suffer from similar conditions. If this treatment works for you, it could open doors for other patients in the future." Robert nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand, and I promise that if I manage to overcome this, I'll do everything I can to give back, to help other people in the same situation." Sarah smiled slightly. "That would be a good start for your redemption, Robert." In the days that followed, Sarah immersed herself in research about the treatment Robert had mentioned. She used her new contacts in the world of gastronomy and business to obtain more information and eventually secured a consultation with one of the doctors involved in the study. A week later, Sarah invited Robert for dinner at her home. When he arrived, he seemed nervous and out of place, a stark contrast to the confident man she had met months ago. "Good evening, Robert," Sarah greeted him, opening the door. "Please, come in." Robert entered hesitantly, his eyes scanning the modest but welcoming apartment. "Thank you for having me, Sarah." "Mum, who is it?" Ethan's voice sounded from the living room. Sarah smiled. "Ethan, this is Mr. Thompson. He's going to have dinner with us today." Ethan appeared at the door, looking curiously at the visitor. Robert seemed to freeze for a moment, his eyes fixed on the boy. "Hello, Mr. Thompson," Ethan said politely. "My mom's food is the best in the world. You'll love it." Robert smiled weakly, clearly emotional. "I'm sure I will, Ethan." During dinner, the conversation flowed surprisingly well. Ethan, with his natural curiosity, asked Robert several questions about his life and work. Robert, in turn, seemed fascinated by the boy's intelligence and maturity. After dessert, Sarah asked Ethan to go to his room to do his homework. When they were alone, she turned to Robert. "I have good news," she began. "I managed to speak with Dr. Anderson, who is leading the study on the new treatment. He agreed to evaluate you for possible inclusion in the program." Robert's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, I don't know what to say. How did you manage this?" Sarah smiled. "Let's say my new position gave me some useful contacts. Also, Dr. Anderson became interested when I mentioned that you have the same condition as Ethan. He thinks studying both cases can provide valuable insights." Robert looked in the direction of Ethan's room, a look of understanding dawning on his face. "So that's why you invited me to dinner, for me to meet Ethan?" Sarah nodded. "Yes. I wanted you to see that despite the challenges, it's possible to live a full and happy life. Ethan is proof of that. He's an amazing kid," Robert said softly. "You've done a wonderful job raising him." "Thank you," Sarah replied. "It wasn't easy, but every challenge was worth it." They sat in silence for a moment, each immersed in their own thoughts. "Sarah," Robert finally spoke, his voice laden with emotion, "I know I don't deserve your help or your forgiveness, But I promise that if this treatment works, I'll dedicate the rest of my life to making a difference, to helping people like Ethan, like me. Sarah looked into Robert's eyes and saw genuine sincerity. That's all I ask, Robert. That you use this second chance to do good. When Robert left that night, Sarah felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. She hadn't realized how much the resentment towards Robert was still affecting her until that moment. Lying in bed later, Sarah reflected on the events of the past few months. Her life had changed drastically, in a way she could never have predicted. And now, she was in a position to not only care for her son, but also make a difference in the lives of other people. With a smile, Sarah closed her eyes, grateful for the path life had carved for her, and eager for what the future held. The following months brought a series of exciting developments for Sarah and her family. The success of the restaurants in Emily's dealerships continued to grow, with new units being opened in other cities. Sarah found herself traveling frequently, overseeing new openings and training kitchen teams. Meanwhile, Ethan continued to thrive with his new treatment. His health had improved significantly, allowing him to participate more actively in school and extracurricular activities. Sarah watched with pride as her son flourished, not only physically but also in his passion for science and cooking. One afternoon, while Sarah was working in her home office developing a new menu for the next restaurant opening, Ethan came in, carrying a science project. "Mom, look," he exclaimed, his eyes shining with excitement. "I won first place in the school science fair." Sarah smiled broadly, hugging her son. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. What was your project about?" Ethan began to explain animatedly about his experiment, which investigated how different temperatures affected food textures. Sarah listened attentively, impressed by how her son had combined his interest in science with the passion for cooking he had inherited from her. "You know, Mom," Ethan said after finishing his explanation, "I was thinking, what if we created a special dish for your restaurant based on this research? Something that would show how temperature can completely change the eating experience." Sarah looked at her son, an idea beginning to form in her mind. "Ethan, that's brilliant. In fact, I think we can do something even bigger with this idea." In the days that followed, Sarah worked tirelessly on a new concept. She wanted to create not just a dish, but a complete experience that combined science and gastronomy. With Ethan's help, she developed a tasting menu that took diners on a journey through the transformations that heat and cold could provide to food. When she presented the idea to Emily, the businesswoman was immediately enthusiastic. "Sarah, this is exactly the kind of innovation we were looking for," Emily exclaimed. "How about we make this a special event? We can invite critics, renowned chefs, and even scientists to experience this new concept." Sarah agreed, although she felt a twinge of nervousness. It was a risky bet, but she believed in the concept and, more importantly, believed in the work she and Ethan had done together. The weeks leading up to the event were intense. Sarah and her team worked tirelessly to perfect every detail of the menu. Ethan, excited about his role as junior scientific consultant, spent hours in the kitchen with his mother, testing and refining the preparations. On the night of the event, the restaurant was filled with prominent figures from the world of gastronomy and science. Sarah, dressed in her chef's uniform, nervously watched from the kitchen as the waiters began to serve the first course. "Everything will be fine, Mom," Ethan whispered, holding her hand. "We practiced a lot." Sarah smiled at her son, feeling a wave of gratitude and love. "You're right, sweetie. Let's go, we have a show to put on." The menu began with a contrast appetizer, where guests were served two spheres identical in appearance, but one was frozen and the other hot. When bitten, they revealed completely different flavors, demonstrating how temperature could transform the perception of taste. As the night progressed, murmurs of approval and exclamations of surprise filled the restaurant. Each dish was a demonstration not only of Sarah's culinary skill, but also of the scientific principles behind food transformations. The main course, dubbed Thermal Equilibrium, was a masterpiece of culinary engineering. It consisted of a dish divided into hot and cold sections, with elements that transformed as the diner mixed them, creating new textures and flavors. At the end of the meal, Sarah and Ethan came out to greet the guests. The reception was warm, with many compliments and enthusiastic questions about the concept. Michael Parker, the food critic, approached with a wide smile. Sarah, this was simply extraordinary. You not only elevated gastronomy to a new level, but you also managed to make science delicious and accessible. Sarah smiled, putting her arm around Ethan's shoulders. Actually, the credit goes to this young scientist here. It was his science project that inspired the whole concept. Ethan blushed at the praise, but his eyes shone with pride. The event was a resounding success. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's restaurant saw a significant increase in demand, with many customers eager to try the innovative tasting menu. More importantly, the experience had further strengthened the bond between Sarah and Ethan. They had created something together, uniting their passions and talents in a way neither of them could have imagined before. One night, as they prepared dinner together at home, Ethan looked at Sarah with a smile. "Mom," he said, "when I grow up, I want to be a chef scientist like you." Sarah laughed, hugging her son. "You already are a chef scientist, my love, and I'm sure you're going to do amazing things in the future." As they continued to cook, Sarah reflected on how much their lives had changed. From moments of despair and uncertainty, they had reached a place of joy, success, and above all, love. And she knew that together, they could face any challenge the future might bring. The success of the Science in the Kitchen event catapulted Sarah and her restaurants to a new level of recognition. Invitations for lectures, TV show appearances, and even proposals to write a book started pouring in. Sarah found herself torn between the excitement of new opportunities and the concern of maintaining balance between her rising career and her role as a mother. One morning, while having coffee with Ethan before taking him to school, Sarah received a call from Emily. "Sarah, I have incredible news." Emily's voice sounded excited over the phone. "We've received an invitation to open a pop-up restaurant in Paris during Fashion Week. It's a unique opportunity to present our concept internationally." Sarah's heart raced at the news. Paris, the world capital of gastronomy. It was a dream she didn't even know she still had. But then, her eyes fell on Ethan, who was watching her curiously from across the table. "Emily, this is... wow," Sarah responded, her voice mixing excitement and hesitation. "How long would this project last?" "It would be a 2-month commitment," Emily explained. 1 month of preparation and 1 month of operation during the event. "I know it's a long time, but think of the doors this could open." Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. 2 months away from Ethan seemed like an eternity. "Can I think about it for a bit? I need to talk to Ethan first." Of course," Emily responded understandingly. "Take the time you need. But don't take too long, we need to give an answer by the end of the week." After hanging up, Sarah turned to Ethan, who was looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What is it, Mom? You look worried," Ethan asked. Sarah sighed, sitting down next to her son. "Ethan, sweetheart, a very special opportunity has come up for the restaurant. We've been invited to open a temporary restaurant in Paris." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Paris? Wow, Mom, that's amazing." "It is," Sarah smiled, touched by her son's enthusiasm. "But it would mean I'd have to be there for 2 months. Ethan's smile faltered a little. 2 months, that's quite a long time." Sarah nodded, feeling her heart tighten. "That's why I want to talk to you about it. Your opinion is very important to me. What do you think?" Ethan was silent for a moment, clearly thoughtful. Finally, he looked at Sarah with a determination surprising for someone so young. "I think you should go, Mom," he said firmly. "It's an incredible opportunity for you and for the restaurant, and I'll be fine." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears, touched by her son's maturity. "Are you sure, my love? 2 months is a long time." Ethan smiled, though Sarah could see a touch of sadness in his eyes. "I'm sure. Besides, we can video call every day, right? And who knows, maybe I can visit you during school break." Sarah pulled Ethan into a tight hug, feeling a mixture of pride and gratitude for the amazing son she had. "You're the best son a mother could ask for, you know that? And I'd love for you to visit me in Paris." In the days that followed, Sarah found herself in a whirlwind of preparations. She accepted Emily's proposal and dove headfirst into planning the pop-up restaurant. At the same time, she made sure to organize everything for Ethan's stay with Mrs. Johnson, who promptly offered to take care of the boy during her absence. On the eve of her departure for Paris, Sarah prepared a special dinner for Ethan. As they ate, she couldn't help but notice how her son seemed to have grown in recent months. "Ethan," she began, putting her fork aside, I want you to know how proud I am of you. Your understanding and support mean the world to me." Ethan smiled, a little shy. "I know it's important to you, Mum, and I want you to be happy and successful." Sarah felt her heart fill with love. "You are my greatest success, sweetheart. Nothing I do in my career will ever be more important than you." The next morning at the airport, Sarah hugged Ethan for a long time, fighting back tears. "Remember," she said, adjusting his jacket, "video call every night. And if you need anything at all, call me immediately, no matter what time it is." Ethan nodded, his eyes also watery. "I'll be fine, Mom. Good luck in Paris. Show them what an American chef can do." With one last hug and a kiss, Sarah headed to the boarding gate, looking back several times to see Ethan waving. The trip to Paris was long, and Sarah spent most of the time reviewing her plans for the pop-up restaurant. When she finally landed, she was greeted by a team from Emily's company, who took her directly to the location where the restaurant would be set up. The space was stunning, an old building in the heart of Paris overlooking the Seine. But Sarah barely had time to admire the view before being engulfed in a series of meetings with suppliers, designers, and her newly formed kitchen team. The days that followed were a race against time. Sarah worked from dawn to dusk, overseeing every detail of the restaurant setup, from decoration to menu elaboration. Her nights were dedicated to long video calls with Ethan, where she shared the day's emotions and challenges, and he told her about his classes and scientific experiments. A week before the official opening, during one of the few moments of free time she had, Sarah decided to take a walk through the streets of Paris. As she walked along the banks of the Seine, she couldn't help but think about how her life had changed. Just a year ago, she could barely pay the bills, and now she was about to open a restaurant in one of the most prestigious cities in the world. Her thoughts were interrupted by the ring of her phone. It was Emily. "Sarah," Emily's voice sounded tense. "We have a problem." The food critic from Le Figaro managed to get a reservation for opening night. If he doesn't like it, it could ruin everything before we even start. Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. Le Figaro was one of the most influential newspapers in France, and its review could make or break the restaurant's success. "I understand," Sarah responded, trying to stay calm. "I'll review the menu one more time, make sure everything is perfect." After hanging up, Sarah looked at the river, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She thought of Ethan, of everything they had been through together, of how he had supported her in this adventure. She couldn't disappoint him or herself. With renewed determination, Sarah returned to the restaurant. She gathered her team and explained the situation. "We're going to create something special," she said, her eyes shining with inspiration. "Something that combines the best of American cuisine with French techniques. We're going to show them what we can do." As the team dispersed to begin preparations, Sarah picked up her phone and called Ethan. "Hi, Mom." Ethan's cheerful voice instantly calmed her. "Hi, my love," Sarah smiled. "Listen, I need your help with something. Remember that experiment we did about how different temperatures affect the taste of food? I think we can use that to create something really special here." As Sarah and Ethan discussed ideas, she felt a wave of confidence envelop her. With her son by her side, even if at a distance, she knew she could face any challenge. The restaurant in Paris wouldn't just be a success, it would be a celebration of everything she and Ethan had achieved together. The days leading up to the opening of the pop-up restaurant in Paris were a whirlwind of frenzied activity. Sarah barely slept, dividing her time between the kitchen, where she tested and perfected each dish on the menu, and the rest of the restaurant, where she supervised the final details of decoration and service. The idea that she and Ethan had developed together became the centerpiece of the menu, a dish that changed temperature and texture as it was consumed, providing a unique gastronomic experience that blended French techniques with typically American ingredients and flavors. On the morning of the grand opening, Sarah woke up before the alarm, her stomach in knots. She made her usual morning video call with Ethan, who greeted her with a radiant smile. "Today's the big day, Mom," exclaimed Ethan, practically vibrating with excitement. "You're going to crush it." Sarah smiled, feeling her nervousness diminish a bit with her son's enthusiasm. "Thank you, my love. I wish you were here." "Me too," Ethan said, his smile faltering for a moment. "But I'll be there in spirit. Remember our good luck ritual." Sarah laughed, remembering the tradition they had developed over the years. Of course I do. Ready? Together, even separated by an ocean, mother and son did a silly dance and sang an improvised song about cooking with love. At the end, both were laughing, and Sarah felt her heart lighter. Go out there and show Paris what an American chef can do, Ethan said, giving an exaggerated salute. With a final "I love you" and promises to call later, Sarah hung up and prepared for the most important day of her career so far. The restaurant was a hive of activity when she arrived. Her team, a carefully selected mix of French and American chefs, was already in place awaiting her instructions. Très bien, équipe, Sarah began, mixing French and English in her opening speech. Today is the day we show the world what happens when we unite the best of two rich culinary cultures. Remember, we cook not only with our hands but with our hearts. Let's go. The hours flew by as they prepared everything for the night. As the sun began to set over Paris, casting a golden glow over the Seine, the first guests began to arrive. Sarah nervously watched from the kitchen as the restaurant filled up. Critics, celebrities, renowned chefs, they were all there to experience Paris's new gastronomic sensation. And then he arrived. The critic from Le Figaro, easily recognizable by his imposing figure and the little notebook he always carried. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. It's him, she whispered to her sous chef. The critic from Le Figaro. The sous chef nodded, his expression serious. Don't worry, chef. We're ready. As the night progressed, Sarah coordinated the kitchen with military precision, ensuring that each dish that went out was perfect. From time to time, she peeked into the dining room, observing the guests' reactions. The main course, the one she and Ethan had created together, seemed to be a particular success. Sarah could see the diners' faces light up with surprise and delight as they experienced the changes in temperature and texture. Finally, it was time to serve the critic from Le Figaro. Sarah insisted on preparing the dish herself, putting all her heart and skill into every element. For the critic, she said, handing the plate to the waiter. Welcome to our world. Sarah anxiously watched as the waiter served the dish. The critic examined the presentation for a moment before picking up his cutlery. With her heart in her throat, Sarah saw him take the first bite to his mouth. For a moment, his expression remained neutral. Then, slowly, a smile began to form on his lips. He closed his eyes, savoring the dish, and Sarah could see him make an enthusiastic note in his little notebook. A sigh of relief escaped her lips. She knew it was still too early to claim victory, but that initial reaction was promising. The night continued, and Sarah barely had time to breathe between coordinating the kitchen and occasionally coming out to greet the guests. When the last customer finally left and the team began to clean up, Sarah allowed herself to collapse into a chair, exhausted but radiant. Emily, who had flown to Paris for the inauguration, approached with 2 glasses of champagne. A toast, she said, handing a glass to Sarah, to the resounding success of this night. Sarah smiled, accepting the glass. Thank you, Emily, for believing in me and giving me this opportunity. They toasted, the clinking of glasses echoing in the now empty restaurant. You know, Emily said, looking around, I think we might be at the beginning of something much bigger than just a pop-up. Sarah raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you mean? I'm thinking expansion, Emily smiled. Maybe a chain of international restaurants. Paris, New York, Tokyo, the sky's the limit, Sarah. Sarah's mind spun with the possibilities. It was an exciting prospect, but also frightening. Before she could respond, her phone rang. It was Ethan. Hi, Mom. Ethan's excited voice sounded as soon as she answered. How was it? Tell me everything. Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of love and longing. It was amazing, my love. And a lot of that thanks to you and our crazy ideas. As she told Ethan about the night, Sarah realized that no matter how far her career took her, her heart would always be with her son. The possibilities of international expansion were exciting, but she knew that any decision she made would have to take into account what was best for Ethan. I'm so proud of you, Mom, Ethan said, his voice full of admiration. You're the best chef in the world. With tears in her eyes, Sarah softly replied, And you're the best son in the world, my little chef scientist. As she hung up, Sarah looked out the window at the illuminated city of Paris. She had achieved so much, overcome so many obstacles. And now, with the world opening up before her, she knew she would face the next challenges as she always had, with courage, creativity, and above all, with love. The weeks that followed the opening of the pop-up restaurant in Paris were a whirlwind of media attention for Sarah. The review from Le Figaro, published just 2 days after the opening, was nothing short of stellar. The critic praised not only the innovative fusion of French techniques and American ingredients, but also Sarah's creativity and boldness in challenging culinary conventions. The restaurant quickly became the hottest spot in Paris, with reservations booked out weeks in advance. Renowned chefs, celebrities, and even politicians lined up to experience Sarah's cuisine. Amidst all this excitement, Sarah maintained her daily calls with Ethan. She shared with him each new achievement, every compliment received, and he, in turn, told her about his progress at school and his new scientific experiments. "Mom, you won't believe it," Ethan exclaimed during one of their calls. "My science teacher saw that report about our dish in the newspaper and asked me to do a presentation for the class on how science applies to cooking." Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of pride. "That's wonderful, honey. I'm sure you're going to nail it." "I'm a little nervous," Ethan admitted, "but also very excited. I think I'm going to use our dish as the main example." "Great idea," Sarah encouraged. "Remember, you understand this dish better than anyone. After all, you were a fundamental part of its creation." As they talked, Sarah couldn't help but notice how Ethan seemed more confident and excited. The distance was difficult, but seeing her son flourish, even from afar, warmed her heart. At the restaurant, things continued at full steam. One night, while Sarah was supervising the kitchen, Emily entered, her face lit up by an enigmatic smile. "Sarah, I have exciting news," Emily announced, pulling her to a quieter corner. "I just got out of a meeting with some investors. They're impressed with the success we've had here and want to expand the concept." Sarah raised her eyebrows, intrigued. "Expand? How so?" "They propose opening permanent restaurants in other major cities," Emily explained, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "New York, Tokyo, London. The whole world wants to taste your food, Sarah." For a moment, Sarah was speechless. It was an incredible opportunity, something she had barely dared to dream of a few months ago. But then Ethan's face appeared in her mind. "Emily, this is... wow," Sarah began, choosing her words carefully. "It's an incredible proposal, but I need to think about Ethan. I can't be traveling the world and leaving him alone." Emily nodded, understanding. "I get it, Sarah. And that's why the proposal includes the option for you to establish a base in any of these cities. You could choose where to live with Ethan and oversee the other operations from there." Sarah blinked, surprised. That would change everything." "Think about it," Emily said gently. "Talk to Ethan. We don't need an immediate answer, but the investors would like to know your decision by the end of the month." That night, after service, Sarah walked the streets of Paris, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She found herself stopping in front of the Eiffel Tower, the city lights reflecting in the waters of the Seine. She took her cell phone out of her pocket and, despite the late hour in the US, called Ethan. "Mom?" Ethan's sleepy voice answered. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, sweetie," Sarah replied softly. "Sorry to wake you up, I just needed to hear your voice." She told Ethan about the expansion proposal, carefully explaining what it could mean for them. "Wow," Ethan exclaimed, sounding much more awake. "That's incredible, Mom, but what do you think?" Sarah sighed. "Honestly, I'm torn. It's an incredible opportunity, but you're worried about me," Ethan completed. "Yes," Sarah admitted. "Moving to another country would be a big step. Your school, your friends, your routine. Everything would change." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. When Ethan spoke again, his voice was full of a maturity that surprised Sarah. "Mom, remember when you decided to come to Paris? I supported you because I knew how much it meant to you. And look what happened. You're fulfilling your dreams, and I couldn't be more proud." Sarah felt tears form in her eyes. "Oh, Ethan, I think you should accept," Ethan continued. "Just think of the adventures we could have. And imagine how many incredible science schools there must be in those big cities." Sarah laughed, wiping away tears. "Are you sure, my love? It would be a big change." I am, Ethan replied with conviction. We're a team, remember? Chef and scientist. We can face anything together. At that moment, looking at the Eiffel Tower and hearing her son's confident voice, Sarah felt a wave of certainty envelop her. They really could face anything together. Okay then, she said, a smile forming on her lips. Let's do this. Let's conquer the culinary world, you and me. Yeah, Ethan cheered. But Mum. Yes, sweetie. Can we choose New York? I've always wanted to visit the Museum of Natural History. Sarah laughed, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude for the amazing son she had. Of course we can, my love. New York better get ready for the dynamic duo of chef and scientist. As she hung up the phone, Sarah looked once more at the city of Paris, the city that had changed her life in so many ways. She knew the challenges ahead would be great, but with Ethan by her side, she felt ready to face the world. The future was bright and full of possibilities, and Sarah could hardly wait to see what the next chapter of her life held for her and her son. The months that followed Sarah's decision were a whirlwind of activity. After many discussions with Emily and the investors, it was decided that the first permanent restaurant would indeed be opened in New York, with Sarah taking on the role of executive chef and creative director of the new international chain. The news of the expansion caused a stir in the culinary world. Newspapers and gastronomy magazines from around the world were scrambling to get interviews with Sarah, eager to know more about her future plans. Meanwhile, back in the US, Sarah and Ethan were preparing for the big move. There was so much to be done: selling the apartment, organizing the movie, taking care of visas and necessary documentation. Sarah was surprised by Ethan's efficiency in helping with the preparations, always excited and full of ideas for their new life. One afternoon, while packing Ethan's belongings, Sarah found an old photo album. As she opened it, she was flooded with memories. Photos of her pregnant, Ethan as a newborn, his first steps, birthdays. "What's that, Mum?" Ethan asked, noticing Sarah's nostalgic expression. She smiled, pulling him to sit beside her. "These are our memories, sweetie. Look how small you were." Together, they flipped through the album, laughing at funny photos and reminiscing about special moments. When they came to a photo of Ethan in the hospital, connected to various tubes and machines, Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "This was taken right after we discovered your condition," she explained softly. "Those were difficult times, but look at you now." Ethan looked at the photo for a long moment. "You know, Mom," he finally said, "I think it was because of all this that we decided to be such a good team, isn't it? Chef and scientist facing the world together." Sarah hugged her son, moved by his perception. "You're right, my love. We've been through a lot together, and it's only made us stronger." As the day of departure approached, Sarah found herself torn between excitement for the new beginning and nostalgia for leaving behind the place that had been her home for so long. She organized a small farewell party with close friends, including Mrs. Johnson, who couldn't hold back her tears. "Oh, Sarah," Mrs. Johnson said, hugging her tightly. "Who would have thought that the young single mother I met years ago would become an internationally renowned chef? I'm so proud of you, my dear." On the eve of their departure, Sarah received a surprise visit. It was Robert. I heard you're leaving," he said, looking a bit uncomfortable. "I wanted to come wish you good luck in person." Sarah invited him in, noticing how different he looked, more humble, less arrogant. Robert told her about his treatment, which was showing promising results, and how the experience had changed his perspective on life. "Sarah," he said, his voice laden with emotion, "I never properly thanked you for everything you did for me. You could have turned your back on me after how I treated you, but instead, you helped me. I'll never forget that." Sarah smiled, touched by Robert's sincerity. "I'm glad the treatment is working out, Robert, and I hope you continue to use your second chance to do good." When the day of departure finally arrived, the airport was full of emotions. Friends, family, and even some fans who had discovered about the trip came to say goodbye. Ethan, excited about the adventure that awaited them, could barely contain his energy. As they waited in the boarding line, Sarah felt a hand touch her shoulder. It was Emily. "I thought we had already said our goodbyes," Sarah said, surprised. Emily smiled. "I couldn't let you leave without one last farewell, and without this." She handed Sarah an envelope. Curious, Sarah opened it. Inside were official documents naming her as a minority partner in the company. "Emily, this is—" Sarah began, at a loss for words. "It's the least you deserve," Emily said firmly. "You're not just an employee, Sarah. You're the soul of this business. And I want you to have a real stake in its success." With tears in her eyes, Sarah hugged Emily. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Finally, it was time to board. With Ethan by her side, Sarah took one last look back at the country that would always be her home, no matter where she was. Then, hand in hand with her son, she turned to face the future. As the plane took off, carrying them towards New York and a new chapter in their lives, Sarah felt a mix of emotions: nostalgia, gratitude, nervousness, and above all, immense excitement for what was to come. "Ready for our new adventure, Chef Scientist?" she asked Ethan, smiling. Ethan returned the smile, his eyes shining with excitement. "More than ready, Chef Mom. New York, here we come." And so mother and son set off towards the unknown, ready to face together the challenges and joys that the future held for them. Sarah's story, which had begun with difficulties and uncertainties, was now opening up to a world of possibilities. And she knew that no matter what lay ahead, with Ethan by her side, she could conquer anything. The plane landed at John F. Kennedy International Airport on a sunny September morning. Sarah and Ethan, their faces pressed against the window, watched in wonder as the immensity of New York unfolded before them. The skyscrapers of Manhattan glimmered in the distance, a sight they had only seen in movies and photographs until now. "Wow, Mom!" exclaimed Ethan, his eyes wide with excitement. "That's even more incredible than I imagined." Sarah smiled, feeling a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. "It really is, sweetie. Our new home." As they disembarked, they were greeted by a small entourage from Emily's company. Among them was Jessica, a young executive who had been assigned to help Sarah and Ethan in their transition to life in New York. "Welcome," Jessica greeted them warmly. "I hope you had a good trip. We're all very excited to have you here." The journey from the airport to the apartment that had been prepared for them was quite an experience. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off the window, enthusiastically pointing out each new view of the city. When they arrived at the apartment, located in an elegant building on the Upper West Side, Sarah could hardly believe it. It was spacious, beautifully decorated, and, to her surprise, already had some personal touches, including photos of her and Ethan in frames on the fireplace. "Emily wanted you to feel at home from the very first moment," Jessica explained, noticing Sarah's emotional look. After Jessica said goodbye, promising to return the next day to help them with the necessary formalities, Sarah and Ethan explored their new home. Ethan's room was already equipped with a desk full of scientific equipment, clearly chosen with his interests in mind. "Mom, look at this!" Ethan shouted from his room. "There's even a microscope." Sarah smiled, marveling at the care and attention to detail that Emily and her team had devoted to making them feel welcome. In the days that followed, Sarah and Ethan dove headfirst into their new New York life. Jessica helped them with all the necessary bureaucracy, from obtaining documents to enrolling Ethan in an international bilingual school that offered an advanced science program. Sarah's new restaurant, named Flavor and Science, was scheduled to open in 3 months, giving her time to adapt to the city and finalize all the details. The chosen location was a large, elegant space in the heart of Manhattan, overlooking Central Park. One afternoon, as Sarah was overseeing the construction work at the restaurant, she received an unexpected call from Emily. "Sarah, darling, how are things going there?" Emily's animated voice sounded over the phone. "Emily, everything's great. The restaurant is looking amazing and Ethan is adapting very well to the new school." "Excellent. Listen, I have exciting news. Food and Wine magazine wants to do a cover story about you and the new restaurant. They're fascinated by your story and the concept of mixing gastronomy and science." Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. Our cover story in one of the most prestigious culinary magazines in the world. It was a dream come true. "Wow, Emily, this is incredible," she managed to say. "They want to do the photo shoot and interview next week. Oh, and they loved the idea of including Ethan. They think the mother-son chef-scientist dynamic is fascinating." After settling the details with Emily, Sarah could hardly wait to share the news with Ethan. When she got home that night, she found her son bent over an experiment on the kitchen table. "Ethan, guess what?" she exclaimed, barely containing her excitement. Ethan looked up from his experiment, curious. "What is it, Mom?" Sarah told him about the magazine story, and Ethan's eyes lit up with excitement. "That's awesome, Mom. Can we show them our new experiment?" Sarah laughed, delighted by her son's enthusiasm. "Of course we can, sweetie. In fact, I was thinking, how about we create a special dish for the occasion? Something that really shows how science and cooking can come together in surprising ways." In the days that followed, Sarah and Ethan spent hours in the kitchen, testing and perfecting their ideas. They finally came up with a concept that excited them both, a dish that changed color according to temperature, revealing different layers of flavors. On the day of the photo shoot, the still under construction restaurant was transformed into an impromptu studio. Sarah and Ethan, dressed in personalized chef's coats, Ethan's had Junior Scientist Chef embroidered on it, posed for photos, cooking together and laughing. The food and wine reporter, a man named Mark, was fascinated by the dynamic between mother and son. "It's amazing to see how you work together," Mark commented during the interview. "Sarah, how was it going from solo chef to this partnership with your son?" Sarah smiled, looking lovingly at Ethan. "It was the best thing that could have happened. Ethan not only inspires me with his ideas and curiosity, but he constantly reminds me of why I love cooking, to bring joy and surprise to people." "And you, Ethan?" asked Mark. "What do you like most about creating with your mum?" Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "I like when we manage to do something that seems like magic, but is actually science. Like our new dish that changes color. People are surprised, but then we explain the science behind it and they learn something new." The interview continued, with Sarah sharing her journey from the difficult days in their old town to becoming an internationally recognized chef. She spoke about the challenges of being a single mother to a child with a rare condition and how it inspired her to never give up on her dreams. At the end of the day, when the magazine team left, Sarah and Ethan were exhausted but happy. "I think it went well, didn't it, Mom?" Ethan asked as he helped clean up the kitchen. "It was wonderful, sweetie," Sarah replied, hugging her son. "You were amazing." That night, as Ethan slept, Sarah stood on the apartment balcony, looking out at the New York skyline. She thought about the entire journey that had brought her here, the moments of difficulty, the tears, the doubts, but also the joys, the achievements, and above all, the unconditional love of her son. New York was a new chapter in their lives, full of promises and possibilities. And although the future was uncertain, Sarah knew that with Ethan by her side, she could face any challenge that came their way. With a smile, she made a silent promise to the lights of the city that never sleeps. She would make this new adventure the sweetest and most flavorful of all. The weeks leading up to the opening of Flavor and Science were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah divided her time between supervising the final stages of the restaurant's construction, finalizing the menu, and adapting to life in New York with Ethan. One morning, while having breakfast, Ethan commented, "Mom, there's a science fair at school next month. I've been thinking, what if we did a project that mixed cooking and science?" Sarah smiled, intrigued. "What an interesting idea. What do you have in mind?" Ethan's eyes sparkled with excitement as he explained his idea, an experiment that would demonstrate how different cooking methods affected the molecular structure of food, altering not only the flavor, but also the texture and nutritional value. "That's brilliant, Ethan," Sarah exclaimed. "You know, this gives me an idea for the restaurant too. How about we create an educational tasting menu? Each dish could come with a brief scientific explanation." Ethan clapped his hands, enthusiastic. "Yes, it would be like a science class, only delicious." In the days that followed, mother and son worked together on the science fair project and the new concept for the restaurant. Sarah was impressed by Ethan's knowledge and creativity, which seemed to flourish more and more in his new environment. Meanwhile, the restaurant's opening date was rapidly approaching. One afternoon, during a final meeting with the team, Jessica, Sarah's assistant, rushed into the room. "Sarah, we have a problem," she said, looking worried. "The main organic ingredient supplier just informed us that they won't be able to meet our demand for the opening. Something about a bad harvest." Sarah felt her stomach sink. Those ingredients were crucial for several key dishes on the menu. "How long do we have to find a new supplier?" "The opening is in 2 weeks," Jessica replied, consulting her tablet. It will be difficult to find someone who can provide the quantity and quality we need in that time frame. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She had faced bigger challenges before. This was just another obstacle to overcome. All right, let's solve this, she said, determined. Jessica, I need you to make a list of all the small organic producers within a 100-mile radius of New York. We'll contact each one of them if we have to. In the hours that followed, Sarah and her team worked tirelessly, making calls, sending emails, and even organizing quick visits to some nearby farms. It was during one of these visits that Sarah had an idea. What if, she said to Jessica as they were returning to the city, instead of relying on a single large supplier, we created a network of small local producers. We could even highlight the origin of each ingredient on the menu, telling the story behind each producer. Jessica smiled, excited about the idea. That's brilliant, Sarah. Not only would it solve our immediate problem, but it would also create a stronger connection with the local community. Arriving home that night, exhausted but satisfied with the progress made, Sarah found Ethan working on his science fair project. "How was your day, Mom?" he asked, noticing the tiredness on her face. Sarah told Ethan about the challenge with the suppliers and the solution they had found. To her surprise, her son's eyes lit up. "Mom, that's perfect for my project," Ethan exclaimed. "We can make an interactive map showing where each ingredient comes from and how distance and cultivation method affect flavor and quality." Sarah hugged her son, amazed by his insight. "You're a genius, you know that? This will not only be great for your project, but we can also adapt the idea for the restaurant." In the days that followed, Sarah and her team worked tirelessly to establish partnerships with various small producers in the region. Each visit to a farm or community garden brought new inspirations for the menu and the restaurant concept. Ethan, in turn, dove headfirst into his project, creating an elaborate digital map that showed the journey of each ingredient from field to table, complete with information on cultivation methods, environmental impact, and nutritional profile. Finally, the big day of Flavor and Science's opening arrived. The restaurant was stunning, with a decor that blended modern elements with rustic touches that harkened back to the partner farms. In the center of the dining room, a large screen displayed the interactive map created by Ethan, allowing customers to explore the origin of each ingredient in their dishes. When the doors opened, Sarah felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The first customers began to arrive, including food critics, renowned chefs, and even some of the local producers they had partnered with. The educational tasting menu was an instant success. Customers were enchanted not only by the innovative flavors, but also by the scientific explanations that accompanied each dish. Many spent several minutes exploring the interactive map, fascinated by the journey of each ingredient. At the end of the night, exhausted but radiant, Sarah gathered her team for a toast. "You were amazing," she said, raising her glass. 2 weeks ago, we thought we were facing a disaster, but together we turned this challenge into something extraordinary. This is just the beginning of our journey, and I can't wait to see what else we'll create together." As the team celebrated, Sarah felt a small hand hold hers. It was Ethan, who had stayed awake to see the end of the opening night. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said, smiling. Sarah knelt down to hug her son, feeling tears of happiness form in her eyes. "And I'm proud of you, my little scientist. We couldn't have done this without you." That night, as New York continued its endless dance of lights and sounds outside, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the difficult days in their old town to opening her own restaurant in one of the most competitive cities in the world. Each challenge had strengthened her. Each obstacle had made her more resilient. And now, with Ethan by her side and an incredible team supporting her, Sarah knew she was ready for any adventure the future might bring. Flavor and Science wasn't just a restaurant, it was the beginning of a new chapter, full of delicious possibilities and exciting discoveries. 6 months passed since the triumphant opening of Flavor and Science. The restaurant had quickly become one of the hottest gastronomic spots in New York, accumulating positive reviews and a waiting list of weeks for reservations. Sarah and Ethan had adapted well to life in the city. Ethan was flourishing in his new school, particularly excelling in science classes, while Sarah divided her time between the restaurant and occasional lectures at culinary schools and gastronomic events. One Saturday morning, as Sarah and Ethan were having breakfast in their apartment overlooking Central Park, the phone rang. It was Emily. "Sarah, darling," Emily's voice sounded excited. "I have thrilling news. The International Gastronomy Week in San Francisco wants you to be the guest chef of honor this year." Sarah almost choked on her coffee. "San Francisco? But that's—" I know," Emily interrupted. "It's on the other side of the country. But think about it, Sarah. This is an opportunity to show everyone there how much you've grown, how much you've achieved. Plus, it would be great publicity for the restaurant and for our future expansion plans." Sarah was silent for a moment, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Going to San Francisco, to the city where it all began, where she faced so many difficulties. The idea was both tempting and frightening. "Can I think about it a bit, Emily?" Sarah finally responded. "I need to talk to Ethan too." "Of course, dear," Emily said understandingly. "But don't take too long, they need an answer soon." After hanging up, Sarah turned to Ethan, who was watching her curiously. "What is it, Mum?" he asked. Sarah explained the situation to her son, carefully observing his reactions. Ethan's eyes lit up. "Going to San Francisco? That would be incredible, Mom. We could visit Grandma, and I could show my old friends how much better I am now." Sarah smiled, touched by Ethan's enthusiasm, but a part of her still hesitated. "I don't know, sweetie," she said softly. "There are many difficult memories there." Ethan took his mother's hand, surprising her with his maturity. "But there are also many good memories, right? And look how much things have changed. You're not that person afraid of the future anymore. You're a famous chef now." Ethan's words touched Sarah deeply. He was right. She was no longer that scared and insecure woman. She had faced her fears, overcome obstacles, and built a new life for them. "You know what?" Sarah said, smiling at her son. "You're right. Let's do this." In the weeks that followed, Sarah and her team worked tirelessly on the preparations for the event in San Francisco. She decided to create a special menu that would tell her journey through food, from simple dishes that harkened back to her difficult days to elaborate creations that represented her current success. Finally, the day of the trip arrived. As she boarded the plane with Ethan, Sarah felt a mixture of anxiety and expectation. When they landed in San Francisco, they were greeted by a small crowd of journalists and fans. "Chef Sarah, how does it feel to return to San Francisco as a culinary celebrity?" shouted a reporter. Sarah smiled, holding Ethan's hand. "I feel grateful and emotional. This city saw me in my most difficult moments, and now I can return to show that with perseverance and love, we can overcome any obstacle." The days that followed were an emotional roller coaster. Sarah revisited places from her past, the small apartment where she lived with Ethan, the restaurant where she used to work, the park where she took her son to play in her rare moments of free time. Down each place, memories hit her hard, but now she could look back with a new perspective. Each difficulty had been a stepping stone on her journey to the present. The highlight of the week was, undoubtedly, the gala dinner that Sarah prepared to close the event. The hall was filled with renowned chefs, food critics, and personalities from the culinary world. Before serving the first course, Sarah took the stage for a brief speech. Her gaze swept across the hall, stopping on familiar faces. Mrs. Johnson, who was crying with pride, some of her former kitchen colleagues, and even Robert, who waved discreetly, a genuine smile on his face. "Good evening, everyone," Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "The journey that brought me here today wasn't easy. There were moments when I thought about giving up, when the weight of the challenges seemed too great to bear." She paused, her eyes meeting Ethan's, who smiled encouragingly from the front row. "But I learned that our greatest challenges often become our greatest strengths. Each obstacle I faced taught me a valuable lesson about resilience, about creativity, about the power of love and support from those around us." Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "The menu I've prepared for you tonight tells this story. Each dish represents a chapter of this journey. From the simple rice and beans that was often our only meal, to the more elaborate creations we now serve in New York. But the secret ingredient in each dish, what truly gives flavor to everything, is love. Love for cooking, Love for my son, love for life and all its possibilities. When she finished her speech, the hall erupted in applause. Sarah saw tears in the eyes of many of those present and felt her own tears running down her face. The dinner that followed was more than a meal. It was a celebration of Sarah's journey, a tribute to American cuisine, and a fusion of cultures and flavors that left all those present in awe. At the end of the night, exhausted but radiant, Sarah joined Ethan in a quiet corner of the hall. "You were amazing, Mom," Ethan said, hugging her tightly. Sarah smiled, stroking her son's hair. "Thank you, my love. But you know, none of this would be possible without you. You're my inspiration, my strength." As they watched the party continue around them, Sarah reflected on how much their lives had changed. From a single mother struggling to survive in San Francisco, she had become an internationally recognized chef. But more important than professional success was the journey she and Ethan had traveled together. "You know, Ethan," Sarah said softly, "I think I finally understood something important." "What, Mom?" Ethan asked, curious. "That true success isn't in awards or recognition. It's in moments like this, when we can look back and see how much we've grown, how much we've overcome. And above all, it's in the love we share and the lives we touch along the way." Ethan nodded, a wisdom beyond his years shining in his eyes. "And we still have many adventures ahead, don't we, Mom?" Sarah laughed, hugging her son once more. "Yes, my little chef scientist. Many delicious adventures await us." And so, under the twinkling lights of San Francisco, Sarah and Ethan prepared for the next chapter of their journey, knowing that together they could face any challenge that the future might hold for them. The return to New York after the resounding success in San Francisco brought a new wave of emotions and opportunities for Sarah and Ethan. Flavor and science had become an international phenomenon, with reservation requests coming in from all corners of the world. One morning, a few weeks after their return, Sarah received an unexpected call from Emily. "Sarah, darling, brace yourself for some bombshell news." Emily's voice was overflowing with excitement. "We've just received an invitation to open a branch of Flavor and Science in Tokyo." Sarah almost dropped the phone in surprise. "Tokyo? But that's... wow!" Emily continued, barely containing her enthusiasm. "The Japanese culinary community was fascinated by our approach of mixing science and cooking. They think it would be a huge success there, especially if we incorporated elements of Japanese cuisine into our concept." Sarah's mind was spinning with the possibilities. Tokyo was known for its innovative food scene and its deep appreciation for precision and technique in cooking, something that aligned perfectly with the philosophy of flavor and science. "This is amazing, Emily," Sarah finally managed to say, "but it would be a big step. We'd need to spend considerable time in Tokyo to set everything up." I know, Emily gently interrupted. "That's why I want you and Ethan to travel there for a month. Get to know the culture, the cuisine, talk to local chefs. See if it's something you really want to do." After hanging up, Sarah immediately went to tell Ethan the news. He was doing homework at the kitchen table. "Tokyo!" Ethan's eyes widened with excitement. "Mom, that's incredible. We can see the giant robots and eat real sushi." Sarah laughed at her son's excitement. "Well, I'm not sure about the giant robots, but we'll definitely have plenty of sushi. What do you think? Are you ready for another big adventure?" Ethan nodded enthusiastically. "Always ready for new adventures with you, Mom." In the weeks that followed, Sarah and Ethan prepared for their exploratory trip to Tokyo. They studied basic Japanese together, researched the culture and, of course, the local cuisine. When they finally arrived in Tokyo, they were greeted by a representative from the Japanese partner company. The city was a spectacle of lights, sounds, and aromas that amazed them from the first moment. The days that followed were a dizzying mix of business meetings, visits to local restaurants, and cultural explorations. Sarah was impressed by the dedication and respect that Japanese chefs had for their ingredients and techniques. One afternoon, while visiting the famous Tsukiji fish market, Sarah had an epiphany. "Ethan," she said, watching the fishmongers skillfully cut an enormous tuna, "what if we incorporated the Japanese philosophy of respect for ingredients into our flavor and science concept? We could create dishes that not only explain the science behind the food, but also celebrate the journey of each ingredient, from its origin to the plate." Ethan's eyes lit up with the idea. That would be incredible, Mom. We could use technology to show customers exactly where each ingredient comes from, how it's grown or caught, and how that affects the final flavor. Their excitement was contagious, and soon Sarah was discussing the idea with potential Japanese partners. The response was overwhelmingly positive. As the month in Tokyo came to an end, Sarah and Ethan had not only fallen in love with the city and its culture, but had also developed a solid plan for the Japanese branch of Flavor and Science. On the night before they were to return to New York, Sarah and Ethan sat in a small ramen restaurant, reflecting on their adventure. "You know, Mom," Ethan said between spoonfuls of his ramen, "sometimes I still can't believe everything that's happened in the last few years, from our old town to New York, and now maybe Tokyo." Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude and love. "I know, sweetie, it's quite a journey, isn't it? But you know what makes me happiest?" "What?" Ethan asked curiously. "That we're doing all of this together. You and me, facing each new challenge, exploring each new opportunity, no matter where we are in the world, as long as we're together." Ethan smiled, reaching out to hold his mother's hand. "We're an unbeatable team, aren't we? Chef and scientist, conquering the world one dish at a time." Sarah laughed, squeezing her son's hand. "Exactly. And who knows where our next adventure will take us?" As they finished their meal, watching the constant flow of people passing by the small restaurant window, Sarah felt a wave of anticipation for the future. Tokyo represented not just a new business opportunity, but a new chapter in her journey with Ethan. From a single mother struggling to survive in their old town, she had become an internationally recognized chef, about to expand her culinary empire to the other side of the world. But more important than any professional success was the unbreakable bond she shared with her son. Together, they had transformed each obstacle into an opportunity, each challenge into a chance to grow and learn. And now, with the world literally at their feet, Sarah knew that no matter what the future held, she and Ethan would be ready to face it, with creativity, courage, and, of course, lots of love. The months that followed the exploratory trip to Tokyo were a whirlwind of activity for Sarah and Ethan. Back in New York, they dove headfirst into preparations for the international expansion of Flavor and Science. Sarah spent countless hours in video conferences with the Japanese team, discussing everything from the new restaurant's design to the logistics of importing American ingredients to Tokyo. Ethan, in turn, took on the task of thoroughly researching the science behind Japanese cuisine, fascinated by the ancient techniques of fermentation and food preservation. One afternoon, while Sarah was reviewing some contracts in her home office, Ethan burst through the door, his eyes shining with excitement. "Mum, I had an incredible idea for the restaurant in Tokyo," he exclaimed, barely able to contain his enthusiasm. Sarah smiled, putting the papers aside. "Tell me everything, my little scientist." Ethan took a deep breath and began to explain. "What if we created a dish that combined Japanese fermentation techniques with American ingredients? We could use, for example, fermented corn in the style of Japanese koji." Sarah was speechless at her son's creativity. "Ethan, that's brilliant! A true fusion of cultures and techniques." Excited by the idea, mother and son spent the next few hours in the apartment's experimental kitchen, testing different combinations and techniques. The result was an innovative dish that they called Midwest Meets Tokyo, a fermented corn croquette stuffed with shiitake mushrooms and topped with a maple syrup reduction. In the weeks that followed, Sarah incorporated this creation into the planned menu for the Tokyo restaurant, along with other equally creative fusions. News of the upcoming opening began to circulate in the international media, generating a buzz of expectation in both Japan and the United States. Amid the frantic preparations, Sarah received an unexpected phone call. It was Robert. "Sarah," his voice sounded hesitant, "I heard about the expansion to Tokyo. I wanted to congratulate you. You really made it." Sarah felt a mix of emotions upon hearing Robert's voice. "Thank you, Robert. How are you?" There was a pause before he answered. "I'm much better, actually. The treatment is working and, well, I started doing volunteer work with children who have the same condition as me and Ethan." Sarah smiled, genuinely happy for him. "That's wonderful, Robert. I'm glad you found a purpose." "Actually," Robert continued, That's why I'm calling. We're organizing a charity event to raise funds for research on the disease. I was wondering if you'd be willing to be our guest chef." The proposal caught Sarah by surprise. She hesitated for a moment, remembering all the ups and downs of her history with Robert. But then she thought of Ethan, of all the children who could benefit from the research. "It would be an honor, Robert," she finally replied. "Count me in." In the days that followed, Sarah found herself dividing her time between preparations for Tokyo and planning the menu for the charity event. Ethan, upon learning of the event, insisted on helping. "And we can create special dishes that are not only delicious, but also nutritious for people with our condition," he suggested enthusiastically. The charity event was a resounding success. Sarah and Ethan worked side by side in the kitchen, creating dishes that not only delighted the guests' palates, but also touched their hearts. Robert gave an emotional speech, publicly thanking Sarah for her support and forgiveness. At the end of the night, as the last guests were leaving, Sarah, Ethan, and Robert found themselves in a moment of quietude. "You two are incredible," said Robert, looking at mother and son with admiration. "What you've accomplished, it's inspiring." Sarah smiled, putting an arm around Ethan's shoulders. "Thank you, Robert, but you know every challenge we faced brought us here, including the difficult moments with you." Robert nodded, his eyes shining with emotion. "I'll never be able to apologize enough for how I acted, but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make a difference just like you are." Ethan, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Robert, have you ever thought about using food science to help people with our condition? Maybe we could collaborate on some research." Robert's eyes widened at the suggestion, and Sarah couldn't help but laugh at her son's expression. Always the scientist, always looking for new ways to help. "You know what?" said Sarah, looking from Ethan to Robert. "I think we might be at the beginning of something really special here." As they left the event venue, Sarah reflected on how her life had changed, from moments of despair in their old town to an expanding culinary empire, from enmities to unexpected collaborations. Each step of her journey, each challenge and each triumph, had contributed to shaping who she was now. With Ethan by her side and a world of possibilities ahead of her, Sarah knew she was ready for the next chapter of her adventure. Tokyo awaited them, with its own discoveries and challenges, but she was confident that together they could conquer anything. And so, as the lights of New York shimmered around them, Sarah, Ethan, and Robert walked together, animatedly discussing future collaborations and projects. The future was bright, full of promises of new recipes, new scientific discoveries, and above all, new ways of making a difference in the world, one dish at a time. The inauguration of Flavor and Science in Tokyo was rapidly approaching. Sarah and Ethan had temporarily moved to the Japanese capital to oversee the final preparations. The restaurant, located in the elegant Ginza district, was a perfect fusion of American, Japanese, and scientific elements, reflecting Sarah's international journey. A week before the grand opening, Sarah received unexpected news. The Japanese Ministry of Education had reached out, interested in implementing a pilot program in schools based on Ethan's approach of mixing science and cooking. "Mom, can you believe this?" Ethan exclaimed, barely able to contain his excitement. "They want me to help develop the curriculum." Sarah hugged her son, feeling a wave of pride. "That's incredible, my love. You're changing lives, you know." While Ethan immersed himself in the new project, working with local educators to create lessons that would make science fun and delicious, Sarah faced her own challenges. The pressure for the Tokyo opening to be a success was immense, with critics and chefs from around the world planning to attend. One night, while working late in the restaurant kitchen, experimenting with a new recipe, Sarah received a surprise visit. It was Hiroshi, a renowned sushi chef from Tokyo who had become a mentor and friend during her stay in Japan. "Sarah-san," Hiroshi said with a gentle smile, "you need to rest. Perfection doesn't come from exhaustion, but from balance." Sarah sighed, putting the knife down. "I know, Hiroshi-san. It's just that there's so much at stake." Hiroshi nodded understandingly. "I understand. But remember, true flavor comes from the chef's heart. And your heart, Sarah-san, is full of love and passion. Trust in that." Hiroshi's words resonated deeply with Sarah. She realized that, amidst the pressure and expectations, she had strayed a bit from what really mattered, the joy of cooking and sharing that passion with others. The next day, Sarah decided to do something different. She invited Ethan and a small team for a tour of the local market. Together, they explored unique ingredients, talked with producers, and let themselves be inspired by the aromas and textures. Back in the restaurant kitchen, Sarah proposed a fun challenge. Everyone should create a dish using at least one local ingredient they had never tried before. The result was an explosion of creativity and laughter, with dishes ranging from a green jackfruit sushi to a mochi stuffed with chocolate fudge. This, Sarah thought, watching her team work excitedly, is the true spirit of flavor and science. Finally, the big day of the inauguration arrived. The restaurant was stunning, with every detail carefully thought out to provide a unique experience for customers. In the center of the dining room, a large interactive screen displayed fascinating information about the ingredients and techniques used in each dish. When the doors opened, Sarah felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. The restaurant quickly filled with VIP guests, food critics, and enthusiastic culinary enthusiasts. The tasting menu was a journey through the 3 countries that had shaped Sarah's cuisine. It started with a sophisticated reinterpretation of traditional American dishes, moved on to innovations developed in New York, and culminated with bold fusions that incorporated Japanese techniques and ingredients. The star dish of the night, without a doubt, was the Midwest Meets Tokyo created by Sarah and Ethan. Customers were amazed not only by the unique flavor, but also by the story behind its creation. As the night progressed, murmurs of approval turned into enthusiastic praise. Critics who had arrived skeptical left enchanted, already drafting positive reviews on their cell phones. At the height of the night, Sarah took the small stage set up in the restaurant for a brief speech. Her eyes scanned the room, stopping on familiar faces. Emily, who had flown in from New York for the occasion, Hiroshi, smiling proudly from a corner, and of course Ethan, his eyes shining with admiration. "Good evening, everyone," Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "Flavor and Science is not just a restaurant. It's a celebration of curiosity, creativity, and the connection that food can provide." She paused, smiling at Ethan. "My son once told me that cooking is like doing a delicious scientific experiment, and he was right. Each dish we serve here is the result of exploration, of trial and error, of passion, and above all of love." Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "This restaurant is the culmination of a journey that began in a small kitchen in our old town, passed through New York, and now reaches Tokyo. But more than a geographical journey, it was a journey of growth, overcoming, and discovery." She raised her glass. "So tonight, I want to propose a toast to the science that helps us understand the world, to the cuisine that allows us to savor it, and to all of you who allow us to share our passion. Kanpai, kanpai," the crowd responded in unison. As the guests continued to celebrate, Sarah joined Ethan in a quiet corner of the restaurant. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," Ethan said, hugging her tightly. Sarah smiled, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. "And I'm proud of you, my little scientist. Look at what we've built together." Observing the packed restaurant, the smiles on customers' faces, the animated buzz of conversations in various languages, Sarah felt a wave of gratitude and accomplishment. From a single mother struggling to survive in their old town, she had become an internationally acclaimed chef, expanding her culinary empire to the other side of the world. But more important than any professional success was the unbreakable bond she shared with Ethan and the positive impact they were having on the world through food, science, and love. As the opening night came to an end, Sarah knew this was just the beginning of an exciting new chapter. With Ethan by her side, the world was a giant culinary laboratory, full of flavors to explore, scientific mysteries to unravel, and hearts to touch. And she could hardly wait to see what the future held for her little family of chef and scientist, united by their love for food and discovery. The months that followed the triumphant opening of Flavor and Science in Tokyo were a whirlwind of activities for Sarah and Ethan. The restaurant quickly became one of the hottest gastronomic spots in the city, with reservations booked out months in advance and a waiting list that seemed to grow daily. While Sarah balanced her time between supervising operations in Tokyo and keeping an eye on the New York and San Francisco units, Ethan was completely immersed in his project with the Japanese Ministry of Education. One afternoon, as Sarah was reviewing some reports in her makeshift office at the restaurant, Ethan burst through the door, his eyes shining with excitement. "Mom, you won't believe it," he exclaimed, almost breathless. "The pilot program in schools was an incredible success. They want to expand it nationwide." Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of pride. "That's wonderful, sweetie. Tell me more." Ethan began to explain animatedly how the classes that mixed science and cooking had captured the students' imagination. Children who previously found physics and chemistry boring were now eager to learn about chemical reactions through the fermentation process or understand thermodynamics concepts through cooking. "And you know what's even more incredible?" Ethan continued, barely containing his excitement. "They want to create a textbook based on our method. A book that can be used in schools all over Japan." Sarah was speechless at the news. "Ethan, that's extraordinary. You're literally changing the way children learn science." Ethan's face turned serious for a moment. "You know, Mum, this made me think. What if we could do something like this, not just in Japan, but all over the world, especially in places where children have less access to quality education?" Sarah felt her heart swell with love and admiration for her son. At 12 years old, Ethan was already thinking of ways to positively impact the world. "That's a wonderful idea, my love," she said, hugging him. "Why don't we start planning something?" In the weeks that followed, between the demands of the restaurant and the educational project, Sarah and Ethan began to sketch out plans for a foundation. The goal would be to bring the teaching method that mixed science and cooking to schools in underprivileged communities around the world. Meanwhile, the success of Flavor and Science continued to grow. One day, Sarah received an unexpected call from Emily. "Sarah, darling, brace yourself." Emily's voice was overflowing with enthusiasm. "We've just received an invitation to open a branch of the restaurant in Dubai. They're fascinated with our concept and want us to be part of a new luxury gastronomic complex." The news caught Sarah by surprise. Dubai. It was an incredible opportunity, but it also presented new challenges. How to adapt the Flavor and Science concept to Middle Eastern culture and ingredients. That night, during dinner, Sarah shared the news with Ethan. "Dubai?" Ethan's eyes lit up. "That would be amazing, Mom. We could explore ancient Arab culinary techniques and mix them with our scientific approach." Sarah smiled, once again impressed by her son's enthusiasm and creativity. "You're right, sweetie. But we also have to think about how this would affect our other projects. The restaurant here in Tokyo, the educational program, our idea for the foundation." Ethan became thoughtful for a moment. "What if we turned this into an opportunity to expand all our projects? We could use the restaurant in Dubai as a research and development center, not just for new dishes, but also for new ways of teaching science through cooking." Ethan's idea made Sarah's eyes shine. "You're a genius, you know that. This could be the start of something really special." In the months that followed, Sarah and Ethan found themselves dividing their time between Tokyo, New York, and exploratory trips to Dubai. Each new challenge seemed to open doors to even greater opportunities. The foundation project began to take shape, with plans for pilots in schools in Brazil, India, and South Africa. Ethan's textbook was in the process of being translated into several languages, and the concept for the restaurant in Dubai evolved to include a culinary scientific laboratory open to the public, where visitors could participate in delicious experiments. One night, as they watched the sunset over Tokyo Bay from their temporary apartment, Sarah pulled Ethan close. "You know, son," she said softly, "sometimes I wonder how we got here. From our small kitchen in our old town to all of this." Ethan smiled, resting his head on his mother's shoulder. "I think it was a little bit of science, a little bit of cooking, and a whole lot of love." Sarah felt tears form in her eyes. "You're right. And you know what? No matter where our next adventure takes us, I'm grateful to have you by my side." As the sky tinged with shades of orange and pink, Sarah reflected on her journey. From moments of despair to unexpected triumphs, each step had led them to this moment. And now, with the world literally at their feet, she knew the future held infinite possibilities. Flavor and Science had become more than a restaurant. It was a movement, a way of seeing the world through the lenses of curiosity, creativity, and compassion. And with Ethan by her side, Sarah knew they would continue to spread this spirit, one dish, one class, and one heart at a time. As the first stars began to dot the night sky, Sarah and Ethan remained embraced, dreaming of the adventures tomorrow would bring. The world was their kitchen, and they were just beginning to explore the menu of possibilities. 5 years had passed since the opening of Flavor and Science in Tokyo. What began as a single restaurant in New York had transformed into a global empire of gastronomy and education. With units in 6 countries and the Sarah and Ethan Foundation operating in dozens of communities around the world. It was a sunny Sunday morning in Dubai, where Sarah and Ethan were spending a few weeks to oversee the launch of their newest project, a culinary and scientific research center open to the public. Sarah, now 45, watched with pride as Ethan, at 17, conducted a demonstration class for a group of local children. He had grown not only in stature, but also in confidence and skill, becoming a true ambassador for the mission they had embraced together. And that's how, folks, we can use spherification to create these little flavor explosions, Ethan explained, demonstrating how to transform pomegranate juice into small spheres that burst in the mouth. The children watched in wonder, their eyes wide with fascination. After the demonstration, while the children tried making their own spheres, Sarah approached Ethan. "You were amazing, sweetie," she said, hugging him. "These kids will never look at science or food the same way again." Ethan smiled, a little shy at the praise. "I learned from the best, Mom." That afternoon, as they walked along the beach, reflecting on all they had accomplished, Sarah felt a wave of emotion hit her. "You know, Ethan," she began, her voice soft, "sometimes I still find myself thinking about that night in our old town, when we barely had enough to eat, and I didn't know how we'd pay next month's rent." Ethan took his mother's hand, squeezing it gently. "And look where we are now." Sarah nodded, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. "All of this, it's more than I ever dreamed possible. And it's all thanks to you, my love. Your strength, your creativity, your huge heart. You inspired me to be better, to dream bigger." "No, Mom," Ethan said, stopping to look into her eyes. "It was both of us, together. We've always been a team, remember? Chef and scientist, conquering the world one dish at a time." Sarah laughed, remembering the words that had become a sort of mantra for them over the years. As the sun began to set, painting the Dubai sky with vibrant shades of orange and pink, Sarah and Ethan sat on the sand watching the gentle waves of the Persian Gulf. "And now?" Ethan asked, a glimmer of curiosity in his eyes. "What's the next chapter of our adventure?" Sarah smiled, putting her arm around her son's shoulders. "Well, you're about to go to college. Harvard and MIT are practically begging to have you." Ethan blushed slightly. "I still haven't decided, you know. Part of me wants to study molecular gastronomy. Another part wants to focus on science education." "Why not both?" Sarah suggested. "You've never been one to limit yourself to just one thing. Who knows what new ideas you might bring by combining these two passions?" Ethan's eyes lit up with the possibilities. "You're right. And you, Mum? What do you plan to do while I'm in college?" Sarah looked at the horizon, thoughtful. "You know, I've been thinking about writing a book. Not just a cookbook, but something that tells our story. How we used food and science to overcome challenges, build bridges between cultures, and make a difference in the world." "That would be incredible," Ethan exclaimed. "We could include some of the stories of the children we've helped through the foundation, too." As they animatedly discussed ideas for the book, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. Her journey had been long and, at times, difficult, but each challenge, each obstacle had led them to this moment. From a single mother struggling to survive in their old town, she had become a world-renowned chef, a successful entrepreneur, and, most importantly, a force for good in the world. And Ethan, her little warrior who once fought against a rare disease, was now about to embark on his own journey of discoveries and achievements. As the stars began to dot the Dubai night sky, Sarah pulled Ethan into a tight hug. "No matter where life takes us next," she said softly, "it will always be the two of us against the world. Chef and scientist, mother and son, partners in all adventures." Ethan returned the hug, his voice full of emotion. Always, Mom. Always. And so, as the world spun around them, full of infinite possibilities and new horizons to explore, Sarah and Ethan remained there, united by love, passion, and the unwavering belief that, together, they could transform the world. One delicious experiment at a time.